I want to thank Stephanie Bailey and the Blue Outpost Texas Democrats organization for the work that you all are putting into the most important series of elections of our lifetimes, highlighting these critically important state house races, where for the first time in 20 years we have a chance to win a majority in the state legislature, is critical not only for getting back control of our state government and dismantling the infrastructure of voter suppression and voter intimidation and moving forward on the big things that we want to do for our fellow Texans. But it's also going to help us up ballot, whether they are the congressional races that we want to hold on to Democratic seats or the congressional races where we can flip a Republican seat into Democratic control, or defeating John Cornyn, Donald Trump's single greatest enabler in the United States Senate, and sending in his place MJ Hagar, who will represent us in a way that we can be proud of. Or this, Texas has a chance for the first time in 44 years, since 1976, to send our electoral college votes to the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, and defeat Donald Trump, and thereby turn the page on Trumpism and begin the next necessary new chapter for this state and for our country. Texas has the chance to come through big time for America. And that fight is being led by these courageous state house candidates who are doing everything they can at this critical moment of truth. Thank you for highlighting them. Thank you for elevating the importance of these races. And thank you for the work that you're doing between now and November 3rd.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth installment of the Blue Outpost Texas Democrats Candidate Forum for wonderful candidates that are running for the State House. If you're in Texas and phoning in, you know what we're doing. We're going to flip the House. You know that we have been working very hard to flip the state. I'm delighted that Beto could join us. You know, Beto is our most popular, most well-known Democrat, and he is still in this fight. And I emphasize that because one of the things that's changed about the Democratic Party, in case you haven't been paying close attention, and if you're phoning in from another part of the country, one of the things that's changed about Texas politics and Democrats is that we keep fighting. And that's different. There was a time when Democrats would run and not win and go home and sulk, and I'm not going to do that again. No, we are absolutely determined. We believe that the future of democracy hangs on our performance. And we believe that the future of democracy hangs on our ability to flip the Texas House. Now, let me explain why. There's a lot of reasons. Beto mentioned many of them. But when we control the House, we then have a very strong hand in redistricting the state. And that's essential. You know, Texans are progressive people. I mentioned this the other evening. We're progressive people. We're energetic. We're enthused. We're innovative. And we're dominated by Republicans, not because Republicans outnumber us. No, sir, they don't. It's because they got a hold of the primary process. And gerrymandering is a big part of how they hang on to power, which is why gerrymandering's got to go. Now, when Texas and when Democrats control the House, and when we have a say in how these districts are drawn, and true political competition comes back to Texas, the whole country will feel it. And I am so excited to be a part of this. And we have wonderful candidates that are running for the State House. Why do I think we're going to flip it? Well, the state is getting ready to elect Democrats. We've been doing it in 2018 when Beto and I were on the ballot together. He and I came close. We didn't win, but I'll tell you who did win, which is 12 people that were running for the Texas House, which puts us 9 seats away from having the majority. And so we have wonderful candidates who are campaigning with as hard as they can, and they need your support. They need your support. They need money. We only got about 6 weeks left. That's plenty of time to campaign. That's plenty of time to get your message out. It takes money, and we need you to help them. And one last thing, every person who turns out for a Democrat who's running for the State House is going to stick around and vote for Joe Biden. And we all know that we need to flip the White House. But let's talk about the State House and the wonderful folks that we have running. And you're going to meet them in a second. You're going to hear all about them. What I want to do is I want to thank the sponsors who helped us put this program together. We couldn't do it without you, and I'm going to read it off, and I really appreciate you guys. Our sponsors: 312th Family District Court Judge Clinton Chip Wells, 270th Civil District Court Judge Deidre Davis. Club sponsors: the Blue Bayou Democrats, Meyerland Area Democrats, Texas Democratic Women Harris County Chapter, Houston Stonewall Young Democrats, Southwest Democrats, Cy-Fair Area Democrats, Humble Area Democrats, Democratic Club of the Woodlands, Energy and Environmental Democrats, Road Women, Cypress Tomball Democrats, Kingwood Area Democrats, that's where I'm coming to you from, Spring Democratic Club. Our royal sponsors are former County Clerk Diane Troutman, Carl Jones, Humble Area Democrat President John Carter, and we have our Sapphire sponsors, Texas Senate District 3 Committeewoman Shirley Layton, Texas Senate District 7 Democrats, Attorney Mark Whitehead, and finally our organizational sponsors, Powered by the People, Harris County Democratic Party, Flip the Texas House, Sisters United Alliance, Swing Left Texas, Indivisible Houston, Blue Action Democrats. Before I turn it over to your hosts, first of all, thank you so much, all that you are sponsoring. Let me just say this. I ran for the first time in 2014 for controller. And then, of course, I was active in the 16 races. And then I ran again in 2018. And what I can tell you from the perspective of 7 years is the energy and the enthusiasm and the effort and the numbers and the support behind our effort is just growing, growing, growing. And we know that we will flip the state. So let's make it happen now with these fabulous candidates who are joining us this evening. And thank you in advance for helping them financially. Okay, now it's my pleasure to turn it over to the two that are going to get us through the evening. They're doing a wonderful job at this. My good friends, Jaime Rodriguez and Carly Moser.
Howdy, Mike.
Hey.
Jaime, Carly, good to see you again.
Thanks again for doing this for us. It's such a delight to have you. And you're one of the hometown heroes here in East Texas. But more than that, you've become more of a folk legend in Texas. You're traveling all over the place,
Wow.
And it sounds like even now in the time of COVID, you're going to be traveling. So kudos to you.
Thank you
Well,
for
that's kind
your
of
hard
you.
work.
I wouldn't say legend. I'm not going to go there, but I'll tell you, I challenge anybody to look at their odometer and see who's got more miles than me. I may not be the smartest and I may not be the best looking, and I'm certainly not the richest, but I've worn out 4 trucks.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, and for those people from around the country, this is 256 counties. So Mike is all over the place. He ran for lieutenant governor. We expect to see good things from him in the future. But right now, let's focus on November, and that's what he's doing.
Let's focus on the House. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you Thursday or Sunday, I guess, Mike.
Yeah,
thanks.
See you Sunday.
Well, Carly, it's up to us tonight. What are you thinking?
I'm really excited. We have some great candidates joining us tonight, and I cannot wait to start the conversation. I'm so glad to have you back after missing you the other day. We missed you greatly, but you look great, and I'm so happy to have you here.
When we started these debates back in January and then in May, I did 8 of the 9 by myself as the moderator. And I told the group in the fall, if we're going to do this, I need to have a co-moderator because you never know if there's a day one of us wants to be off. And so I was so happy, and everybody knows that we're all so happy that you've joined us on our team. And you did a great job Tuesday night by yourself.
Thanks. It's an honor to be thought of, and it's an honor to be part of this great group. It's amazing. I'm learning as much as anybody else, I think. So thanks.
Good. Well, why don't we get to it? Why don't you introduce us to tonight's guests?
So tonight we have 2 fantastic Democrats. We are joined by Joe Drago.
Hey, how are y'all?
Hey, and Miss Montoya.
Hello, everyone.
Excellent. Howdy. Okay, so why don't we jump right into this? I'm going to explain to the audience how the format of the show is tonight, and then we'll let Carly take it away from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a 1-minute introduction from each of the candidates, and then we're going to go into a lightning round, and that's just 5 or 6 questions to get the audience to know who you are. And just remember, the idea is for you to answer in 1 or 2 words. You don't need a lot of lengthy explanations. This is just meant to give the audience a quick jump into deep end, as it was, about who you are. And then we'll get to some serious questions, some philosophical questions. And those of you who have been watching the show, the philosophical questions are the kinds of questions that we should be able to ask any candidate running for basically any office anywhere, and hope that they've thought about these things. And again, their answers are not as important as how they got to their answers. That's really what we're listening for is, how do they think? How do these candidates think? because more than anything, 5 or 6 years down the road, that's what we're going to want to know. 5 or 6 years down the road, the themes and the issues of the day will be very different than they are today. And we would love to be able to predict how these candidates are going to react 5 or 6 years from now. So those philosophical questions are very important. But then we will get to the issues of the day, and we have a lot of them. And at the end of the first hour, we will then let you talk about your district specifically and the challenges and opportunities in your district. But then at 8 o'clock, you, the audience, will be able to give us your questions, and these candidates will answer them. So at the very end of the 8:30 hour, we'll let them have a closing statement, and that's kind of the show for the evening. Well, the philosophical questions, the issues of the day, will give you 1 minute to answer. And I do have the little stopwatch to keep us honest. But then during the audience questions, we drop down to 30-second answers. It's a lot harder, but we have a lot of questions, and we know the audience wants to get all of their questions in. So challenging evening, but it'll be a lot of fun. Are you all ready for that?
Ready.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us. And we're going to do this in a round robin style. So everybody that starts the first time will the other opponent, or the other candidate, pardon me, will start the next round of questioning. But first, we will start with your 1 minute introductions, and we will start with Selena Montoya for HD 121.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Carly and Jaime. Joe, good to see you here tonight. And thanks to Mike for kicking it off for us. My name is Selena Montoya. I'm running for Texas House District 121, which is in San Antonio, Texas. This was seat of the former Speaker of the House, Joe Straus. And so it's notable because in 2018, I was the first Democrat to run in this district almost since its inception. So we were running, an all on faith. But as it turned out, by the end of election night in 2018, it was too close to call. Beto, in fact, won this district. And so now this is one of the 9 targeted seats we need to flip the state house and change control of the state of Texas. Why this matters to me? Well, I grew up here in District 121, raised by a mom who took care of 7 of us, making ends meet by cleaning houses, humble work, humble beginnings, but it was a fair shot for each of us to be able to have success in life. After graduating from high school, I went all the way to school. I attended Northwestern University, where I studied journalism. I was a fellow with the Innocence Project, and eventually came back here to San Antonio to be a reporter for Texas Public Radio. And I started to discover a different part of San Antonio, a part where we could see the inequities in health and education and economics. And because of that, I left my work as a reporter to start a nonprofit focusing on literacy and children in our community. And I'm proud to say that that is now one nonprofit that the state of Texas has determined is providing teacher training for those in our schools who are reaching the needs of those students and their families. But it didn't stop there. There's a need in this community, and there's a change happening. And we all need to be a part of this change. Because if you're anything like me, you woke up from Election Day in 2016, and you realized something had to be done. Something had to be done about being the most uninsured state in the country. Something had to be done about funding our public schools, and something had to be done to give Texans the fair shot they deserve. That's the promise I had growing up, and it's the same thing I hope for my own children. And that's why I'm running.
Thank you so much, Selena. That was amazing. Joe Drago, to you, introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks again for having us on. Selena, good to see you. And Jaime and Carly, thanks so much for putting this together. We really appreciate it. I remember waking up on the morning after, I believe it was November 9th, 2016, because I actually ran in 2016 for judge countywide. So I remember that feeling, waking up and wondering what's going to happen over the next 4 years. Of course, we've seen what has happened in the last 3.5, and we know it's time for a change. As Carly mentioned, my name is Joe Drago. I was born and raised in Fort Worth, still live here, went to school here, and I have 2 daughters that are intelligent, independent, and determined. One of them is a biomedical engineer. The other one is studying to become a physical therapist. My family is actually from down close to the coast in Port Arthur, Texas. My grandparents came here in 1921 from Sicily. And settled in Port Arthur, Texas, and opened up a hardware store in 1931 at the height of the Great Depression. And even though we have big box stores now, it's still open. It will open its doors tomorrow morning after 89 years. So I'm very proud of that. Why I'm running is basically that morning on November 9th, waking up and realizing that I could do so much more and have such larger voice in our public debate on what we can and what we cannot do as Americans and as Texans in this country. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to have representatives and leaders that have the backs of their constituents instead of representatives and leaders that are worried about protecting their own backs. So we thank you so much for having us here today, and we look forward to the conversation.
Great. Okay, let's get right into it. Let's start with the lightning round and get to know you a little bit better. So let's start now with Joe. Joe, who's your opponent this time around?
David Cook, current mayor of Mansfield. It's an open seat.
Okay. Oh, okay. And Carly? Selena, sorry.
Steve Allison.
Okay.
All right. And Selena, how long have you lived in your district?
Over 5 years, but I grew up here.
And Joe?
I have lived in this district for 3.5 years. I grew up in the district next door when the numbers were different. It was 96 and 97 now, but it was different then.
So, Joe, have you ever been elected before as an adult?
Have not. No. I ran for judge in 2016, but I was not elected.
Okay. And Selena?
Not for any public office.
Okay.
So then, Selena, that answers the question. Have you ever run for this position before?
I ran in 2018.
Oh, great. And Joe?
I have not run for the state house. Like I said, I did run for judge on a countywide basis, and it was a great experience.
Great.
Good. And it sounds like who is your political hero, Joe?
Barbara Jordan.
Selena? Good Texas answer.
I don't want to copy him, so I'll go with Miss Ann Richards.
There you go.
Two wonderful women.
Carly, so far in this entire series, has anybody said anybody other than a female Texan?
There you
go. Yeah, I believe that one of our candidates on Tuesday said FDR.
Okay.
Still okay, still great, always, but generally women, which I think says a whole lot about the progress still needing to be made, because we need more of those women. I need more than just Barbara Jordan and Ann Richards as my heroes. Okay, next question, very fun, very good. Selena, next spring when President Joe Biden shows up with Vice President Kamala Harris, where are you going to take them to lunch in your district?
Well, I'll bring them home. I'll make them some enchiladas, rice and beans, and they can have lunch here in my kitchen.
I love that.
Also, sorry.
Also, very COVID safe, depending on where we're at there. Joe, same to you.
I would probably take him. I mean, if I could, I would have taken him to my grandmother's house. Like Selena said, she's an Italian woman. She passed away last year at the age of 105. But living on the coast, it's that Italian Cajun cuisine. It would have been really good.
Right. What about in your district?
In my district, there's a place called Bourre's, which is a New Orleans Cajun type cuisine, which does remind me a lot of my grandmother's. So a lot of black and red fish and red beans and rice and jambalaya and etouffee. So good stuff.
I spy with my little eye, a little one in the background.
I do too.
They'll make an appearance, I'm sure. Anything to not go to bed.
That's okay.
2020.
Okay, so Joe, one of the big differences between the two parties right now seems to be that one party doesn't really care about reading or facts or any of those kinds of things. So let's find out, as a Democrat, what are you recommending people read right now?
As a Democrat, I would recommend that people read the book called Team of Rivals. And that's a book about Abraham Lincoln and his cabinet. And when Abraham Lincoln was elected, he put together a cabinet of his rivals. They weren't necessarily from his political party. And I think that helped shape his presidency, especially going into what eventually turned out to be the Civil War.
Great. And Selena, introduce us to your kids.
Sure. Well, this is Olivia here.
Hi, Olivia.
In 4th grade.
She's my big sister.
Yes, your big sister. And this is Jack, and he's in kindergarten. And he is just starting to read. So a lot of our books are bedtime stories. So I would have to say, if there was a book I would recommend, one of our favorites right now is called Rosie Revere Engineer. And it's about having imagination and pursuing your passion, regardless of what people say or think.
Hey, Olivia and Jack, are you both there?
Yeah.
So take this opportunity and tell all our viewers, vote for our mom. Can you do that?
Can you tell everyone vote for mommy? And look at their drawings.
Nice. Very, very nice.
It was very big at our house. So you say vote for mommy? The best endorsement, right?
Good.
They're independent.
Well, you have passed our portion of our lightning round questions with wonder and loveliness and very, very cool kids who need to get some rest so that they can go to school tomorrow. Got to learn so you can be good Democrats later. We need those good Democrats. We also want to remind our viewers at home that we will be taking live questions in the comments all night so that the last half hour we can ask these beautiful candidates what your questions are and they can answer for you. And candidates, I also encourage you both, if we don't get to all of them, please go find those comments and answer them directly. It means a lot to our viewers and to your voters. Also, make sure to donate $17 at least to each of these candidates in honor of the 17 most flippable House seats in Texas, and go to their websites, which will be on a banner throughout the evening. And please sign up to phone bank, text bank, write postcards, do lit drops. We have all manner of volunteer opportunities for every candidate that are safe, socially distanced, and healthy. So please, please do that throughout the night. I believe now we're going to move on to the state question part of our evening.
Yeah, philosophical questions. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, the philosophical questions. So this is the first philosophical question that we have, is something that seems to be going on in quite a lot lately, and it deals with how we get information out to the voters and to the public at large. So what do you feel is the responsibility of both professional journalists and online activists in getting information across to voters and viewers, whether it be in media or on the internet? And I will start this one with Selena.
Well, as someone who is a former journalist herself, I feel as if the responsibility of journalists is to be stringent in the truth and to be as transparent in how you get your information as possible. For those folks on social media, I have to admit it was just starting out when I was still in the newsroom. And so it felt a bit like the Wild Wild West. Mm-hmm. And now that everyone has a platform, I think there's something to be said for being able to speak directly to your audience and to connect with them in a way that, we really didn't get to before. For a long time, I think journalism and reporters were inaccessible to some people. And one of the things that I tried very hard to do in some of my reporting was to be in those places that a lot of folks didn't often go. And I think you find some really special stories and really special people there.
Thank you so much. Joe?
It's hard to compete with a journalist on that question. But I think one of the most important things for a journalist or anybody trying to get their message out there, whether it's on social media or not, is simply to be authentic and to be themselves, because that's who we are ultimately as individuals, and not necessarily put on a mask or some kind of facade and pretend to be people that we aren't. And I think we see a lot of that in some of our leaders and some of our politicians, and we don't. And people can tell when you're not being authentic and when you have that mask on. And we need to reveal who we are. And speak to people as we would just in a normal conversation, and speak the truth, and then try to listen. As politicians, we do too much talking, not enough listening. And I think the same is true when you're trying to get your message out, whether you're a journalist, whether you're a lawyer talking to a jury. If the jury doesn't think you're authentic, they can see right through you.
So, Selena, I'm going to start with you just to switch it up because it looks like I keep asking the guy the questions and Carly keeps asking the woman the questions. So
Okay,
let's just flip that around for the rest of the show. So, Selena, how do you know when it's time to raise taxes, lower taxes, keep them together? And I know there's a lot of different types of taxes. So talk to us about your calculus when it comes to taxes.
Well, I go back to what it was like for me growing up. I was probably the only fourth grader I knew who knew what a mortgage was and knew what it felt like when it was time to pay the property tax, because we definitely had stress in our household when that came around. We sometimes paid for a gallon of milk and change. And I think the reality is we have too many regressive taxes in this state. And if we're going to truly be responsible and we're going to truly create an equitable opportunity for Texans, then we need to start looking at how we fund not only through taxes, but I think also through opportunities in our revenue streams. Because it isn't just about taxing and spending, right? It's about finding new ways to have resources available to us. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to look at the abundance of natural resources we have here in Texas. We have come nowhere near our capacity to increase our ability to provide energy and be a leader in a new way here in Texas that goes beyond the oil and gas industry.
And Joe?
As Selena was saying, Texans can do anything. And there is such an entrepreneurial spirit in this state that when we all get together and we put our heads together, we can come up with new ways to get the critical funding that we need for public education. I think Medicaid expansion would certainly be a great thing to have. But when it comes to taxes, as Selena said, we do have a very regressive tax system. And I know, in the house I'm sitting in now, I know my house payment went up $300 a month 2 years ago. And people can't afford that. That's a lot of money. And we need to look at those new revenue streams, and we need to look at some of the loopholes that are in the tax system already, look at some of the incentives that are being given out, and look about how to recoup some of the money because we haven't expanded Medicaid. If we can recoup that money, it's billions of dollars. It's about $4.3 billion, which will then free up other money that we can use to pay for critical infrastructure, education, and things like that.
Thank you. Don't forget, donate $17 to each of these candidates in honor of the 17 most flippable House seats in Texas. Give them your time, give them your money. That's how we get them to the State House. Joe, another question. Now that we've talked about when you raise and lower taxes, how do you prioritize which services need those funds most?
I look at what is the foundation of our state. And the foundation of our state, I believe, is our children and our kids. And to me, the thing that we need to prioritize the most is the education of our children and making sure that an educational system is fully funded. In fact, it's constitutionally mandated by the Texas Constitution that the legislature fund public education. So that is number one. That should not be the first place we look to cut when we have a budget crisis. Because the kids of tomorrow, the kids of today are the adults of tomorrow and our future leaders. And so I believe prioritizing those kids and those children into the young adults that they will be. And we're seeing how much more engaged they are, especially in this cycle, and how much more time they're spending in the political process, that they get engaged early on, and that they have the ability and the tools they need to succeed later on in life.
Thank you. Selena?
I agree. Education is a significant priority. But having gone through our public schools here in Texas and started a nonprofit that focuses on literacy, one of the things that we found was a huge challenge for families was simply having books in the house, but even more than that, having food in the pantry. And so before we're able to ensure that our children are ready to learn, we need to make sure that their bodies and minds are fed. And so I think a big part of that is ensuring that we expand Medicaid to meet the needs of our healthcare affordability and accessibility. But that also means that we need to be thinking about the whole child. It's not just about those well checks. It's not just about those immunizations. It's also about the developmental milestones and having support for them, oftentimes which come into play and are afforded through our public education system.
Thank you so much, Selena. I really appreciate that reminder. That's important for all of us. I think Jaime has our next question.
Yeah, so let me switch up a little bit and ask you, because we're Democrats, tell me the name of your union printer and tell me the importance of supporting unions in the middle class.
Yeah, actually, I talked to Sandra today. She's with Prestige Printing here in San Antonio. I've been to their office many times. She has a cute little dog who likes to sit up front, and as little as it is, she's quite fierce. So you've got to get to know them pretty well to make it through the front door. And they're important because they're families just like ours, right? I mean, her cousin works in the office. Their niece was doing, bookkeeping over the summer. This isn't just about paying the bills in their family. This is about creating a family business that can go on for generations, just like our family does. And so, when I look at what a union can do, it can provide the protections that oftentimes small businesses can't provide for themselves. And it's important to create that strength, especially in a family business.
And Joe?
Yes, I use Danwall printers or Designer Graphics out of Tyler, Texas. And the reason I went back to them this time is because when I ran in 2016, I had much more limited funds than I do this year, thank goodness. But the personal service that they gave me, even though I had to drive all the way out to Tyler to get my signs, it was worth it. Because at that time, my campaign team consisted of 3 people: me, myself, and I. And sometimes we fought, sometimes we didn't. But, the importance of those relationships and how they take care of you. It's like my grandfather's hardware store. You take care of your customers and you treat them nicely and you treat them like your family. They're going to come back over and over and over again. And the customer service out there is just so great. And they do a really good job. So
I love how you both know who they are and have a relationship with them. That speaks volumes about Democrats and their commitments to union and loyalty to good business practices. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think this will be our last philosophical question. Pretty easy one. Our wonderful Michelle Obama, who we all love, says, when they go low, we go high. Joe, do you agree?
I do agree. And it's something that what they taught me, my parents taught me. I went to Catholic school for 13 years. And it was drilled in me from day one, and I still believe it today, is that you treat other people as the way you would want to be treated, regardless of how they're treating you. It's our job to listen, and it's our job to be as best a representative that we can be. And, it's not worth it. It's not, earlier when I was talking about authentic, being authentic, it's not who I am to get down and, sniping back and forth and things like that. I'd rather move on and try to solve the problems. We have too much, my profession is filled with confrontation, and it's filled with back and forth being a lawyer, and I've had enough of that. What I'm tired of the most is zero-sum politics, the I win, you lose mentality. And we need to get back to trying to work together. And we saw that in 2019 when we elected 12 new representatives.
Thank you so much. And Selena?
Absolutely. When they go low, we go high. But not only that, we raise the bar. I think we're at a time now where we can raise the expectation of our elected leaders. We can raise the expectation of those institutions that are there and meant to provide support and structure for us and to provide good policy. So yes, I agree. We go high, but we also try to reach even higher.
Good. And before we get to the next section, the actual themes of the day, let's let Carly remind us what you, the audience, need to be doing for us tonight.
Okay, audience, here's your responsibilities. You need to go in the comments and you need to ask questions so that we, this last half hour, can ask these wonderful candidates your questions, your concerns, not just what we think. We want to know what you're curious about. We also need your money and your time. So please, throughout the night, donate $17 to each of these candidates. As one of our previous candidates said, $17 or $17,000. Whatever is in your heart, please give that money to these candidates. As you can see, they're clearly qualified and are working towards justice and equality, and that's what we need in our Texas State House. We also need you to sign up for a volunteer shift for them, to phone bank, to text bank, to write postcards, to do lit drops, to help them in any way that you can. So please, please, please do that. Okay, now we will move on to the state issues of the day questions, and Jaime, I think, has our first question.
So this one is a question that consistently polls number one across the nation. There is no question that this is the first question, and it has to do with healthcare. So let's ask it in this way. How do you provide the most healthcare to the most people given our resources? Selena?
Well, I think we start by expanding Medicaid. And the reality is, the governor has the opportunity to do that right now, today, with one signature. He could ensure that 1 million new Texans have the care they need. But the reality is that's also an investment. So when we expand Medicaid, it means that not only are we providing more healthcare for people here, we're receiving the dollars back that we've sent up to Washington. Mm-hmm. And we're also making sure that we expand access and affordability to healthcare, even for those who have employer benefits. So I think that's, probably across the board. I know one thing that people have been fighting years and years for, and that's why it's so incredibly important for us to gain control of the House so that we actually have a shot at making this happen.
And Joe?
Yeah, obviously expanding Medicaid. 38 states have expanded Medicaid. There's no reason Texas shouldn't be the 39th or the 40th state. In fact, it's crucial. And I'll give you one example. I visit a lot with Swing Left New Mexico. And in 2013, they expanded Medicaid. And Texas has the highest rate of uninsured people in the nation and the highest rate of maternal mortality. The uninsured rate in New Mexico dropped 51% when they expanded Medicaid. Texas is a big state, as we know. It's and it's got a lot of rural areas. I mean, it's further to El Paso from here, where I'm sitting, than it is from El Paso to San Diego. Mm-hmm. So there are so many hospitals in rural areas that are either cutting services or closing down that need those Medicaid dollars that we're sending out to other states so that they can provide the critical health care and resources that people in those communities need because they can't travel hundreds of miles to El Paso or to Dallas or to Houston.
Thank you so much. Those are both fantastic answers. And personally, somebody who has dealt with not having insurance or works in the gig economy, where often we have uninsured Texans, it means a lot to a lot of voters. So I appreciate both your answers. Joe, the next question is particularly a Texan question. We care a lot about guns here in this state. But my question is, what does comprehensive gun policy look like to you?
Well, I mean, comprehensive gun policy to me is being responsible. And again, it goes back to the overriding theme that we've been talking about tonight, is doing things in a common sense and a responsible way. We can protect our rights under the Second Amendment, but we can be responsible and we can be critical in the way that we do that. And the way that we do that is, of course, universal background checks, red flag laws, and closing some of the loopholes that currently exist, because these simple measures, we use the word common sense a lot. They're not really restrictions, but we look at some of the other amendments to our Constitution. They have reasonable restrictions on searches and seizures and jury trials and your right to vote and things like that. And the same can be done with regard to the Second Amendment and guns, as we do with the other amendments, without unduly infringing upon your rights as a Texan and as a United States citizen.
Thank you so much. Selena?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is there are a number of studies that show what the approval rate is of universal background checks. And Texas is no different than the rest of the country. When it comes up, anywhere from 94 to 97% of folks agree all gun transactions should have background checks associated with them. And, as someone who's undergone a background check, it really doesn't take much at all. It's not an inconvenience. It's not something that holds up a purchase. And if anything, I think it brings peace of mind to everyone. And that's really what common sense is about, right? It's about peace of mind. It's about ensuring that, a domestic violence survivor does not have to fear going home because there's a gun in the closet. It's about making sure that here, in a time when we are bringing awareness to suicide prevention, that the number one cause of suicide, which is guns, is not leading to greater death. It's about making sure that at the end of the day, we're not infringing on the rights of gun owners. We are rewarding those gun owners who are responsible and safe.
Thank you so much.
There's some communities that have been affected by this for always, but in 2020, it got highlighted, and it's getting highlighted nationwide so that everybody's taking notice. And the buzzword is social justice reform. Selena, tell us about social justice reform in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my time as a young college student. I was a fellow with the Innocence Project doing work investigating the cases of those we believe to be wrongfully convicted. And eventually, through the work, we were able to successfully obtain post-conviction petitions for the release of 2 individuals. But the reality is their lives were never going to be the same. Those decades spent behind bars could never be repaid with a check. The loss that they incurred, whether that was the loss of a loved one while they were behind bars or the loss of their future. Social justice isn't just about justice for people now. It's about justice for people of the past as well. And I think we have to take a really, a very critical look at the things that we've essentially allowed to slide. And we have to determine how we want to do better, not just in the future, but to make those past wrongs right again. In our community, certainly that has to do with racial injustices as well as socioeconomic injustices and injustices that have to do with our educational system. So it certainly runs the gamut, and it must be a priority.
And Joe?
Social justice reform, I mean, it's a short little buzzword, but it means so much because it runs through and it permeates just about everything that we do in society, from education to healthcare, to housing, to banking, to policing, to so many different things, where unfortunately people are treated differently because of who they are, who they love, the color of their skin, what faith or not they believe in, what gender they are. It's hard to believe that we're in the 3rd decade of the 21st century and women still don't get paid the same amount that men do for the same work. And so when we tackle social justice, we're not just talking about one specific thing. It is a multifaceted, and we've got to have a multi-layered approach to fixing social justice throughout our system so that people are on that level playing field and not starting from 20 yards behind and trying to catch up, because ultimately you're not going to be able to do that.
Thank you, Joe. A reminder, if you are listening at all, these candidates are clearly fit and amazing, and they will be amazing in the 2021 legislature in the Texas State House. So please donate $17 or $1,700 and give an hour of your time or 3 hours of your time to help get these candidates elected. And also, don't forget to ask your questions in the live comments so that we can ask them about your concerns. All right, next question. Joe, if we started asking about or talking about education, I could ask you 8 million questions, right? I could ask you about charter schools and certification of teachers and how we fund higher education, the Robin Hood law. There's a million things I could ask. So I don't have that much time. So give me, in a minute, fix Texas education for me.
Fix Texas education. Well, the first thing that we need to fix Texas education is we need to keep public money or public funding for public schools. We spend too much time diverting some of our public funding to schools such as charters and such as they're considering through vouchers. That public money needs to stay in public schools. We do not need it going out, because if you look at some of the studies that have been done, charter schools receive approximately 2 times the amount of money per student than do public schools themselves. And if you look at the results from charter schools and public schools, they are often worse than the results that are actually occurring in public schools. So that's primarily the main thing, is we need to focus on the public schools first, instead of creating 2 parallel tracks of educational systems, which strain our resources, strain our buildings, our teacher supply, and so many other things, when we should be concentrating on just one specific area and doing what the Constitution tells us to, and that's to fund public education.
Thank you, Joe. Selena, 1 minute to fix it all.
Well, you said a magic word in there, which is something that strikes close to home, and that's Robin Hood, right? The district I grew up in, Alamo Heights, was part of the lawsuit that led to the recapture system we have for public financing of our education. And the reality is, it was meant as a stopgap measure. It was meant to disperse funds in an equal way until we figured something else out. Well, it's been about 30 years and we still haven't figured something else out. And it's about time we did. And so when we're talking about fixing public school finance, it means that we have to go back to the system that we created. This is something we've done intentionally. And we have to recognize what the ramifications of those actions have been, the policies that have been passed, and the ways that it has sort of been integrated into the way that we budget the entire budget of this state. So it is a more complicated question, but it does basically have to do with providing a more equitable formula for funding, because the one we have right now just doesn't cut.
So Selena, in 2017, East Texas experienced one of the worst rain events in all of United States history. And when it happened, the Republican Governor Abbott decided not to release money from something called a rainy day fund. And not every state has a rainy day fund. So if you're not from from Texas, you may not understand this concept. But Selena, tell us in your words, what the heck is a rainy day fund if not for a rainy day event?
Yeah, I actually couldn't tell you, because I do believe that a rainy day fund is meant to be a one-time investment in an area or cause where we have immediate effects that are happening to Texans here and now. And I think you're referring to Hurricane Harvey hovering over the Houston area for days on end, dumping tons and tons of water into the area, leaving many homeless, destruction everywhere. And it wasn't just Houston, it was all along the Gulf Coast. And the reality is, people are still recovering from that today, right as we enter into the bulk of our hurricane season, and we're still monitoring those right now. The rainy day fund, I think is certainly meant to give us a sense of security in this state, but at this time, I think a lot of people are seeing it's a false sense of security when the damages that have been done have yet to be remedied.
And Joe, how do you see the rainy day fund?
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's called a rainy day fund for a reason. And going back to what Selena said with Hurricane Harvey, I can go back even further to Hurricane Ike, because my family lives in Port Arthur, and a house my grandfather built in 1951 was destroyed by Hurricane Ike, and of course they had to relocate and evacuate as a result of Hurricane Harvey, and the devastation that is in some of those poorer coastal towns is amazing, and you can still see it today. And you go back to, what is the fund for? And when do we use it? And I would submit that if any day was a rainy day, Hurricane Harvey sure was one, but 2020 sure is shaping up to be a very rainy day. It is a fund that we should, it's not a fund that we should access all the time. It's there for a reason, and it's there to help us in a crisis, to restore our economy, to boost consumer confidence in our economy, to get people healthy so that they're back in our economy and making our economy work. So I think it's vitally important that we consider using that.
I mean, it's actually called the Economic Stabilization Fund. I mean, when have we, as an entire state, not just a portion of our state, been more unstable than we are right now? Thank you both for your answers on that. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about the energy sector of our state, which is huge here. We often think of just oil when we consider our energy sector, and we have a huge one here. But how do you propose we grow the alternative energy sector here in Texas, given the abundance of natural resources that we have? And I will start with Joe.
Well, I think the first thing we do is elect Krista Castaneda as the railroad commissioner. I've had the opportunity to listen to her speak on numerous occasions, and she's not only a fantastic speaker, but she has great ideas. And as I mentioned before, Texas is such a big state, and yes, we've been an oil producing and natural gas state for years. And that does not necessarily mean that we need to totally move away from it, at this moment in time. But we need to invest in renewable energy. And we have the wind farms out in West Texas, and solar and clean water and things that require investment so that we can move into the latter half of the 21st century so that we can reduce the carbon emissions that obviously we're experiencing. My daughters live in, or one of my daughters lives in California and is right now near the fires up near San Francisco. And the air quality there, of course, is horrible. Mm-hmm. And she's pregnant and about to have our first grandbaby. So we want her to be safe, but we also want, Texans to be safe as well. And we can do that. Certainly a good start would be electing Krista Castaneda.
Love that. Selena.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Krista's a fabulous candidate for railroad commissioner. And, as we're all learning, the Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads, right? We're talking about regulating the oil and gas industry. It's not just about regulating those bad actors. It's also about stabilizing the industry. And we've had such an incredible swing in 2020. If you looked at, where we were in January to where we were in April, it was like night and day. And so one of the things that we can certainly be doing is investing in our renewable energies and looking at those industries as a way to not only to be a leader in energy when it comes to oil and gas, but to be a leader in green energy as well. We know that we're producing a significant amount of wind and solar energy, but we're nowhere near our capacity to do that. And to be a leader on both of those ends of our energy capacity, I think would not only help ensure that we have increased revenue streams and new areas and new jobs for this economy, but I think it would also give a lot of innovation or give way to a lot of innovation, things that I think would inspire Texans as we are really hopeful for the future.
So, Selena, we're going to try to push through a couple more questions before the end of the hour here. Selena, Joe even pointed out earlier, I think, that the distance between El Paso and San Diego is closer than the distance between East Texas and El Paso. And those of us who have lived in the Northeast quadrant for a while know that the distance between Washington, D.C. and New York City is closer than Houston to Dallas. Mm-hmm. And you go through 4 states to do that trip. The difference is in a lot of those places, like in the Northeast quadrant, there is a very robust train system. In Texas, we don't have high-speed rail yet. What are your thoughts on that? And Selena, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, you said yet, right? Which means there's hope. And I think it's partly because we're seeing that the investment in infrastructure has been in our roads. And we're known for having miles and miles of Texas roads that are really preferable to drive on than in many other states. But the reality is we're attracting folks to different parts of this state where the congestion and the environmental implications of having that number of cars on the road is having net negative effects. And so now is certainly the time to start investing in high-speed rail and mass transit and in areas where not only would it make transportation cleaner, but also more accessible for a lot of Texans.
And Joe?
And I think it would be more economically sound as well. Part of my job, most of my work that I do as a lawyer is in Houston or in the Valley. And, I spend a lot of time on Texas roads. And Selena's right. They're good Texas roads. But guess what? There's traffic all over them, especially when you get up into that northern Houston area at 4:30 in the afternoon, or you're trying to leave the city at 6. And it would be so much easier to be able to hop on a train and take it a couple of hours back up to Dallas-Fort Worth or over to San Antonio or wherever, because it is truly a way that we can be innovative on both ends of the spectrum and serve the needs of the people. I think it would help the economy. I think it would increase jobs, obviously, and really be a boon to companies who want to move here because they're able to move around the state a little bit easier than they can now.
Carly, let's push through and get that one last question in before we go to the district information.
Okay, this is just a general question, really easy. What do you think is the most important issue facing Texans today? Joe.
COVID-19 and getting a handle and understanding the pandemic and coming up with a comprehensive strategy, not only to deal with the pandemic, but also to deal with the after effects of the pandemic, whether from a health perspective, because we don't know what the long-term effects of this disease are right now, so that we can also deal with the economy and the crushing blow that we've taken during the pandemic because of the shutdown, and also finally our school children and making sure that they're safe to go back to school. We all know that in-person schooling is the best way to learn, but we want them to be safe. So I think for me right now, at this moment in time, it's making sure that we understand the pandemic and are more prepared, when and if it happens again.
Thank you. Selena?
Yeah, so don't take it from me, take it from the thousands of voters we're talking to here in District 121. It's absolutely about COVID. It's absolutely about healthcare and precautions and ensuring that a recovery is not just thinking about our healthcare system, but it's also thinking about our economic recovery as well. You saw my two kids who hopefully are in bed by now because they're schooling here at home. So the convenience of them coming, getting out of bed and going to school is one thing, but the reality is the quality of their education. While our teachers are doing a phenomenal job in engaging and teaching, we know it's just not the same. We know that there are needs for many students who also don't necessarily have the hardware or the software or the internet access to be receiving that type of education in their home. And so, when we talk about recovery, it's beyond just the healthcare recovery and the economic recovery. It's also about that technological recovery and bridging that gap that we have when it comes to our infrastructure.
Okay, and audience, we'll remind you in about 4 more minutes, we're going to start asking your questions. So start typing ferociously. Blue Outpost TX Democrats on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Blue Outpost TX Democrats. And let's go ahead and, as promised earlier in the hour, we want you to just talk about your district now. Tell us the wonderful things about your district, who it is that you want to represent. And Selena, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
Yeah, so District 121 is a community of people who are hardworking families. They're teachers, they're business owners, they're police officers, they're grandparents, and they're young professionals as well. This is a part of our community where you see people who are doing their best not only to get by, but to thrive. The question is, are we in Texas, as their leaders, as their elected officials, creating policies that allow for that to happen? And right now, when we ask people if they're getting their fair shot, it's a resounding no. I got my fair shot through the public education system that was afforded to me because my mom worked to her bones to ensure that we could stay in our house to go to the neighborhood school that was practically guaranteed to get us a college education. But where you live and what zip code you come from determines not only your educational outcome, but also your health outcomes and the future of your family is at such a level of disparity that it could be considered a completely different community. That's where we have problems. This race isn't just about flipping House District 121. This race isn't just about flipping those 9 seats needed to change control of the state house and change the way that Texas does policy. This race and this election is about changing the way we live and work and thrive together as Texans. There's something that was said in the state convention that's kind of stuck with me, and I'll repeat it here because it always makes me feel good. But the reality is, if we get a majority in the state house, and we can finally expand Medicaid and have affordable health care, we can ensure that our schools are fully funded, we can end partisan gerrymandering, that means that here we can save Texas. We can save the country, and we can save the world. So I hope you'll be a hero and help us do that.
And Joe, I gave Selena a minute and a half, so let me give you the same privilege there.
Never give a lawyer more time. He will use it, or she will use it every time. District 96 is the southern part of Tarrant County, and as probably everybody knows, Tarrant County is the largest urban county in the country that is and has been solidly red for a long period of time. District 96 comprises several different areas: Mansfield, Kennedale, Crowley, a little bit of Fort Worth, a little bit of Arlington, and a little bit of North Burleson. And it is a demographically diverse district, and it's growing more so every day. We have 3 major school districts in this district. All 3 of them are majority minority. And what we're looking for, and what I think, the folks in District 96 want, is they want a leader and they want a representative who listens to them. And not only who listens to them, but understands them, and then will act on their behalf. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be able to please 100% of the people all of the time, but that's not the point. The point is never to stop trying. The point is to be responsive, champion the issues that are important to your community and not just the issues of your donors. It's important to pick this up when it rings and talk to your constituents, because that's the job that you've been elected to do. And I think for far too long, we've sent people to Austin who've lost their way and are not responsive to their constituents. And I want to be that leader, and I want to be that sounding board and try to solve as many problems as I can. Obviously, it's going to take a lot of work, and I'm going to need a lot of help. But that's why we're there. The people of District 96 and all over the state of Texas are our employers. Okay, we're their employees, and we should listen, and we should try to do the best job that we can.
And it's about to get harder because we're only going to give you 30 seconds to answer the next half hour. But we do have several questions already lined up. So Carly, go for it.
So don't forget to give $17 or $17,000 to each of these candidates tonight. Sign up to Phone Bank, Text Bank, fill out postcards for them, do lit drops, go to the polls and, yell their names to voters as they go to the polls. Do anything to get these wonderful candidates elected. We have now moved on to the audience question portion of our wonderful program. These are the questions that count. And our first question is from one of our activists, Latanya, and she asks, she's interested in your stance on legalization of cannabis in Texas. Do you feel that it will at least be legalized in the year 2021? And I will start with Selena.
I feel that the legalization of cannabis would not only do wonders for our justice system, I think it would also do wonders for the suffering revenue stream we have here in Texas. So I would certainly be in favor of that. One thing I think we could learn from those states that have already provided legalization is looking at how the licensing of being a provider and a grower can help uplift those communities that have been severely depressed by the economic impact of COVID.
Thank you. Joe?
I agree. The economic benefits are significant and can be significant, especially with the revenue streams that we have. But also, again, it would cut down on the prison or the school to prison pipeline for small amounts of marijuana and legalization for medical reasons. And those small amounts would help in making sure that we're not sending kids to prison, or we're not sending adults to prison for really minor nonviolent crimes. And so I think that's something that certainly will move forward in 2021 if we can.
And I know these are going to be tough in only 30 seconds or less. But Selena, let me start with you and get back on track to make sure that it doesn't look like we're being biased in who we're talking to. So Selena,
switch it up.
Selena, I just want to make sure that this question gets out. It's been asked several times in other debates, and it's by a woman who's running for the State Board of Education, a Democrat. And so she's pointing out that there is a current law that says that if you're an educator and you talk about LGBTQIA issues in the classroom, that you also have to include in that discussion the idea that there's risky behavior behind that. And tell me your thoughts on that. How does that go with your your conscience?
Well, I think there's probably risky behavior in anything, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point of that policy is to create a level of distance and to create, really a discriminatory policy against individuals. And that at its heart, I think, goes against what our responsibility is in educating, especially in our public schools.
Joe?
And yeah, I agree. I mean, it stifles your voice as to who you are. And we actually had a lawsuit here in Mansfield not too long ago where a teacher was reassigned actually because she did talk about her LGBTQ status. And it's an issue that we face, and it's an important issue that we talk about now, especially, again, we're in the 21st century, folks.
We are in the 21st century. Sometimes it doesn't always feel like that. Clearly, these candidates know what they're talking about, and they are on the right side of things in terms of Democrat morals. So please give $17. Donate your time to their campaign. They need you. They need your vote. Tell 10 people that you know to go vote for them. Early voting starts October 13th. Election day is November 4th. It is time. It is crunch time. Okay, back to our audience questions. How will Texas comply with the 2014 final rule federal mandate 6-hour community intervention every day instead of being in venues of day habs for people with intellectual developmental disabilities? Where are the changing tables over toddler size in public restrooms? Direct care professionals would have to change clients on public restroom floors. There is no dignity there. And it's from an ADA, one of our ADA activists. And we'll start with Joe.
Sure. I mean, obviously, we need to provide as much accessibility and availability for people with disabilities as we can, and especially in families with small children. I mean, there's just no excuse not to do that. It just makes sense. I don't see how we get through as a society without actually following through with that.
Thank you. Selena?
Yeah. So, when we became parents over 9 years ago, the question when we'd be out in public was whether or not where we would go would have a changing table in the men's restroom. I think the question today is, one, do we even need to have gendered restrooms? And two, are we making sure that the restrooms that we're providing our community are accessible to everyone? And I think more often than not, unfortunately, the answer is no. So it is about bringing dignity, not only to families, but also, and that includes families who are same-sex couples, but also to families who have adult and grown children who require assistance. This is a part of your day-to-day life. There should not be any shame in being able to use the public facilities. And yet we see that happening day in and day out. And I think part of this is a culture of hiding disability when really we should be celebrating the differences that make us uniquely Texan.
So to pivot a little, the audience wants to know about jobs. Selena, how do we get more jobs in the rural areas of Texas?
And I would like it to be noted that this question was asked by Elizabeth Hernandez, who is running for Congress. So your fellow candidates are watching you here tonight. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. So no pressure.
I think she has 9 counties in the rural areas of Texas. So this will be good advice to give her.
Yeah, well, I don't claim to be an expert in rural areas, being that San Antonio is the 7th largest city in the country, so we're in a unique position. But from what I gather and talking to folks in the rural caucuses, we're also talking about making sure that there are plenty of educational opportunities that lead to job growth. So it starts with making sure that we are funding our public schools, but also having apprenticeship programs, local community college programs, and the ability to perhaps even school more distance-like if this proves to be an effective way for post-secondary and graduate students to be doing their work. But beyond that, I think the industries that we should be looking at, we mentioned green jobs being one where it requires very little investment up front, both in terms of time and training. But I think the place where we also need to start reinvesting is bringing incentives to our hospitals and those medical facility providers.
Joe, I gave her a minute, so I'm going to let you have that same privilege.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's tough. I know, these are tough. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I think the very first thing that we need to do is make sure that everybody in the rural areas of Texas has broadband internet access. It's hard to create jobs, and it's hard to stay connected, and it's hard to use the technological know-how and ingenuity that we have as a state and as a country if we cannot be connected. And we've seen how important that is with regard to education. So I think that's one of the first things that we've got to tackle so that we can, again, build that foundation and create the opportunities that are necessary for those jobs, whether they be from the energy sector, whether they be from the transportation sector, or even the agricultural sector, to stay connected and to be able to communicate with the people they need to communicate with in order to make those things happen.
Thank you so much, both of you. Again, go to their websites, donate your time, donate a little bit of money. They need to get to the State House. Our next question from the audience is, this week is Direct Support Professionals, which is Paid Home Health Workers Week. And last session, they wanted to give them a dime increase above minimum wage. What would you propose the state do to treat their profession in a more just and equitable way? And Joe, we'll start with you.
Sure. I know a lot about this because my dad was on hospice for a while, and before he passed away in 2011. And the care and the compassion that these workers show to the people that they're caring for is unbelievable. And they are there for the family, and they are there for the patient. And it's not a minimum wage job. It's not a glamorous job. It's not an exciting job, but it's a necessary job. And the compassion that these folks show is unbelievable. So for someone to make $7.35 an hour doing that is a shame. And it's like the rest of the minimum wage. The minimum wage needs to be raised to begin with. And sometimes we treat our most essential and caring and compassionate workers as non-essential. So we need to get a handle on that.
Thank you, Selena.
Yeah, well, I feel like I need to start with a shout out to Virginia and Norma, who give our Nana the care that she needs every day when we can't. So, these are people who we think about as family, right? And you have to think, how would you want your family to be treated? Yes, they're not glamorous jobs, but they do certainly take a lot of care and attention. And for that, they should be compensated, I would say, mightily. I think it's the same conversation we have about teachers. You can't pay them enough for the work that they do. But I would say we should start by increasing our minimum wage to at least $15 an hour.
Okay, Selena, the audience wants us to move back to the energy sector. And the audience member that wrote the question said that he's got solar panels on his home and is wondering, what can we do to incentivize more Texans to go solar?
Starting with me?
Sure.
Okay. Well, so here in San Antonio, one of the things that we've been doing is providing incentives through vouchers, but also there is I hate to call it a competition, but that's kind of what it is. There's sort of a competition among neighborhoods to try to see which areas can produce the most amount of energy onto the grid locally. So being able to kind of gamify the situation, as it were, seems to have an impact on people. I think we have to get creative about trying to be inclusive about this. It's not just about giving back the money. I think it's also about creating purpose in what you're doing and really going through that idea of we're all in it together.
And Joe?
I agree. I think incentives are a great deal and a great help in order to incentivize people to get solar, and and it can have a dramatic effect. And I think once you start to realize and you talk to people who already have solar panels or use solar energy, you'll come to realize what a great effect it does have, not only on your home but on the environment in general. It's part of that clean energy that, and I believe it would be very helpful to the economy as well if we could move in that direction.
Thank you. And in that same vein, buildings are one of the biggest wasters of energy. So what do you think Texas should do to make old buildings more efficient and require all commercial buildings to be more green? Joe.
Sure. What I think might happen, and I've seen this a lot in my industry. Law firms like big buildings. Mm-hmm. We're usually we only have 4 floors, but some law firms are on like the 35th or 36th floor. But the pandemic and forcing us to work from home, I think you're going to see a lot more jobs and a lot more offices go to a virtual home office type of setting. And if that occurs, then that will certainly help with energy and efficiency and things like that. I would have addressed old jobs, but I'll let Selena or old buildings.
So I don't know a lot about this, but I'm going to give it a shot just because it's certainly important. But I think one of the places where we can certainly look are HVAC systems, right? They're often costly and difficult to replace and require a lot of energy and time to do so. But I think the investment and the return on that is in terms of the air quality, but also in terms of the energy efficiency when it comes to any type of building. But I agree with Joe. One of the things we're going to see is I think a transition from having large office buildings to more shared spaces. We're seeing that happen already, and we're seeing that it's having an impact not just on the environment, but on the bottom line of a lot of these businesses.
That's going to be an interesting transition if that does come to fruition, because then what do we do with all those buildings that are at half capacity? I mean, it's truly everything relates to everything, correct?
Affordable housing?
Girl, yes. I'm right there with you. Okay. I may have our next question, I believe.
Yeah. So the audience wants to shift again, flapping in the wind here. We're just jumping back and forth a bit. For-profit prisons. Texas, it's a big thing. At the State House, this is something you're going to be able to address. Where do you stand?
I hope it's something we get to address. I think there are going to be a lot of priorities, but one of the things that we're going to see is some of the senior folks in the House are going to be able to sort of take the reins on things like redistricting, the budget, and education, which I think leaves opportunities for the freshmen who are coming in to take the reins on issues like this that are important, but also require a very close eye to detail. And this is certainly one where we have passed the buck, as it were. These are Texans that we're talking about, and we're not taking care of them. Just because they have been convicted of a crime and been incarcerated does not mean that they should be treated in an inhumane manner.
Joe?
Private prison, my father was a criminal judge for 15 years. So I got to see the criminal justice system up close. And what we're doing now is, we're privatizing so many different industries, whether it be prisons, whether it be our educational system, whether it be CPS and other systems. And when you do that, you lose the transparency and the accountability that a government-run prison or educational system has to follow. And it ends up where the private companies are more concerned about their bottom line than either rehabilitating prisoners, educating our students, or taking care of foster children.
Thank you both. Okay, it's time to remind you all, $17 to both of these candidates. Sign up for 17 hours of volunteer time. Please, please, please. I know it can be a little intimidating if you've never volunteered before, but trust me, it is easy, it is fun, and it's a great way to feel like you're doing your part to save democracy. Please, please, please donate $17 to these wonderful candidates and go to their websites and sign up to volunteer. Okay, our next audience question. Joe, what's the first piece of legislation you would like to write when you become a state rep?
Goodness. One of the first pieces of legislation I would like to write after we get past Medicaid expansion, because I think that's the first thing that we've got to do. I think we have to take a hard look at our foster care system. I have a very good friend of mine who was a foster care mother for 9 years, fostered 57 children, adopted the last one. And he is a cute little boy. He is a little boy all the way through and through. And these are children that unfortunately are the most vulnerable in our society because of the circumstances that they had no control over. And the agencies that we have now are just so overwhelmed that unfortunately these kids get passed around and the problems compound on themselves. And so I would like to write a piece of legislation that would help ease some of that burden.
Thank you. Selena?
So I think one of the things, of course, beyond Medicaid expansion and education that I would like to focus on has to do with our reproductive health care and justice. So one thing would be decriminalizing medical abortion and the medically necessary pills that we need in order to provide that service to Texans. But also ensuring that when it comes to the education around that we are providing protections for individuals who seek that out and they aren't being refused by individuals who may have personal objections to that.
Okay, so jumping back to a previous topic, the disabilities community activists have some great questions tonight. This one is about the idea that when a student reaches the age of 22, they automatically graduate. And so they're out of the system at that point. What kinds of services can Texas provide for those individuals, those students who have now graduated out of the system because of their age? Selena?
Yeah, well, I think we can continue with education. I think that everyone has something that they can offer, and that the ideal college experience is probably something that a lot of us have had to let go of. So has the ideal job situation. I think we need to be more open and flexible to what it means to be a working Texan, and providing that opportunity for individuals and for businesses. I think a lot of families would appreciate the opportunity to have, someone who won't be penalized for bringing some income into their household.
And Joe?
I think it starts with the community, and also, and can increase to the state as far as providing the opportunities and the mentorship, really, of these individuals who may be disabled or can't go to college. And just give them the opportunity to feel good about themselves, and to earn an honest living, and to work hard, and know that other people believe in them and care about them, and that they're just as good as everybody else, and they're just as hard workers, and just essentially giving them that opportunity to succeed, and not just saying they've graduated, okay, I'm done. We forget about them. So it's staying involved and engaged.
Thank you. Joe, should the legislature meet more than every 2 years? Why or why not? And for those of you at home that do not live in Texas and may not understand this, our legislature meets once every 2 years in the odd years, and it's for a few weeks at a time. And that's it. Yep. So my question to you is, or from the audience actually, is, do you think that that's a good idea? Why or why not?
I actually do think it's a good idea. And I'll tell you why. I mean, and you hit the nail on the head. We get to meet for 140 days. And that's it. And this year in 2021, we've got to solve redistricting. We've got to balance the budget, which is mandated by our Constitution. We have to look at healthcare. We have to look at the economy because of COVID-19. And, we have to look at education. And so many other things, which is almost impossible to do in 140 days. And in fact, in redistricting, we're not going to get the census until after the session. So it's going to be hard to do redistricting in 140 days. The governor, and only the governor, can call a special session. And he can do that twice, I believe, for 30 days each. So there's just too much to get done in a big state like Texas to meet every 2 years.
Selena?
Yeah, I have to agree with Joe here. When it comes to the amount of time that is spent at the state house, I think that Texans are suffering because these decisions are being made in a very short time frame, but also being made in a bubble, right? I mean, who would have known where we are today? And had the governor taken the opportunity to declare a special session, as many of our representatives asked for, I think we would see that we were on a quicker road to recovery. So putting it in the hands of one individual to determine whether or not representatives are going to meet, whether or not they're going to be able to share the views and concerns of their constituents, shouldn't be in the hands of one person.
Let's try to push through a few more questions before we give you your final words. So Selena, talk to us about food deserts. They happen in the rural areas, they happen downtown in the major cities. How do we solve the problem of food deserts? Selena?
Yeah, I mean, food deserts are everywhere, right? San Antonio is home to one of the largest food banks serving South Central Texas. And it's, was cited in the New York Times, showing rows and rows of families who, for the first time, many of them experiencing, food insecurity. And the deserts that we're talking about are really lack to fresh and available food. And so one of the things that, of course, our food bank has done is invested in a large agricultural base that is also satellite community gardens out. But I think it goes beyond that. And I think it's also about reimagining what grocery stores and shops look like, and making sure that there's an available, product availability is really what it comes down to.
And Joe?
It's exactly the same. I mean, the food insecurity has become an increasing problem, and we've seen it, as a result of the pandemic. And, that's a basic human need. and that's something that we've got to concentrate on, because as Selena said earlier when I was talking about education, it's making sure that the children are fed and healthy before we can even get them to the education. So it's trying to move some of that infrastructure, and some of those, incentivize some of those companies to actually, put some of the grocery stores in these areas to serve those communities that we need to serve so well.
Well, let's push fast. So, Carly,
Okay, our next question is, the Texas response to COVID has been spotty at best. What would you propose to make the state better prepared and actually execute a good plan in the next pandemic, which are words I don't even want to say? Joe.
Let's have a strategy and not close our eyes to what the potential is that can happen. Like unfortunately, it seems like we've done with this one. Let's learn from this. Unfortunately, a lot of people lost their lives because we did not have a coherent strategy in dealing with this virus. And we need to do better for our fellow humans. If we close our eyes to it, it will happen again.
Thank you, Selena.
Testing, tracing, and immunizing.
let's push through one more question before we get to your closing statements. Let's talk about the minimum wage in Texas. We're one of the states that just uses the federal minimum wage. Is it time to change that, Selena?
Yeah, and I'm happy to say that, in our campaign in 2018, we were the first ones in Bexar County to start offering $15 a minimum wage. And that's not just because the work that our folks were doing we considered important. It's because we felt that was what was the standard for this community.
Joe?
Right. And the standard isn't just minimum, it's livable. $15 is even hard to live on. But it's a start. And the minimum wage has not been raised in 20, 25 years. I remember when I first started working, it was $4 and something. So, but we're at $7.25, and you can work all week and not make enough, to eat, and to have a rent payment. And we need to start by investing in those jobs and increasing those wages.
And to dovetail off of that, will you both commit to having diverse staffs in the Texas House with equal pay for everyone?
Absolutely.
Yes or no?
Yes, accepting applications.
All right. I'll be the first.
Time to wrap up. Why don't you give us 2 minutes for each of them?
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to donate to these wonderful candidates. They will give you a 2-minute closing statement, and we will begin with Joe Drago.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank Carly and Jaime so much for the opportunity to be here and to talk to everyone tonight. It's truly one of the greatest things that we get to do is to actually visit with folks and answer questions, because that's going to be our job. It's going to be our job to address the issues that are on your mind and to make sure that we are listening to what you're saying. And that's the kind of representative I want to be. And I think back to, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, when my grandfather came to this country in 1921, he was 11 years old, and he sailed into Ellis Island. And I'm sure he stood on the deck of the boat and saw the Statue of Liberty. And when he made his way down to Port Arthur, Texas, and started his hardware store called Drago Hardware in 1931, it gave him the opportunity to succeed and to leave a legacy for his children and his children's children. And my father was the only one that left Port Arthur. He came up here and he worked really hard, and he did leave a legacy for his children. And that's what I want to do. Because we have a responsibility, not for ourselves, but for others. We were put here to do yeoman's work. And that is what I will do as your representative in House District 96, is do the work that I've been sent to Austin to do. And it's not simply a stepping stone to another career or another job opportunity or money. It's actually to listen to folks, to make sure that we understand what we need to do, and that we act for the benefit of our community. So one of the, I've always said this, and it means so much to me, and is that the opinions of others and the struggles that people go through, I cannot put myself in your shoes, but I will always listen. And and it's on the sign behind me. It says injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, which was Martin Luther King Jr. from the Birmingham jail. And I really believe that. And that I think we can do better together than we can apart.
Thank you so much, Joe Drago for HD96. And last but certainly not least, Selena Montoya for HD121.
Thank you so much, Carly and Jaime and Joe, for sharing this time with me this evening, and for all of you spending your evening with us today. Joe mentioned a yeoman's work, and it struck me because I think about my grandfather, who was a yeoman in the Navy, and we recently lost him this past summer, or this past spring, and he was the last of the greatest generation in our family. And I mention it because he really started this pride in service in our family. Though he was a yeoman and didn't have the medals and the badges and the things that would signify a high-ranking service member, he was incredibly proud of the work that he did in his service, both in World War II and in Korea. And he passed that pride and service down to me. And I say that because I think we should be expecting more of our leaders. I tell my kids, who you saw earlier today, that as they're struggling to learn sometimes on these screens and not in the same classroom as their teacher, I don't even necessarily care if they finish everything from the day. I just want to make sure that they're proud of the work that they're doing. And I think that's what we should be expecting from our elected leaders as well. And you should feel proud of the work that they're doing. And it should certainly be reflective of the priorities and the things that do need to get done for the day. But let's be real. The things that need to get done for the day are large issues and immense problems that are going to take longer than 140 days to manage. And so we need leaders who are focused on the future and leaders who are invested in every single Texan to make that happen. And that's why I want to provide this service. It's a part of our legacy. It's a part of the blood that runs in me, and something that comes from my grandfather and his brothers who all served. It comes from my own mother, who, even though she was working night and day to just put food on the table and keep a roof over our head, still made time to make sure that she volunteered in our classrooms and was present in our education. I think that's the kind of thing that we should be able to expect from every single one of our representatives. The type of dedication to service that would make you proud.
Thank you both so much. Joe Drago for HD96 and Selena Montoya for HD121. These two candidates, along with every candidate we have talked to throughout Blue Outpost Texas forums, are going to be amazing representations for all of us. So please go to their websites, donate that $17, give that hour of your time to help them get elected, and join us again every Thursday, Sunday, and Tuesday at 7 p.m. for another round of amazing candidates. But most of all, right now, go donate to these candidates. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank y'all.